right? And this is the
Yeah.
important part, right? Is that what the implications are, right? So once that we've identified that in 345, it identifies Christ as being, or Isa ibn Maryam, al-Masih, Christ, as being al-Hayya, or al-Hayy, or Hayya in the Aramaic, as being the life. Then we start to, okay, so we have that other instance I mentioned in 3369, where we read the traditional reading as, and they used to harm Moses, but Allah cleared him of what they said, and he was in the sight of Allah honored. And this is a crucial part here about in the sight. What's actually going on, which we see here, is the Arabic keyword here is inda. Inda, or I can't pronounce it well, forgive me, does not mean in the sight of. It literally means near or with, implying proximity, nearness, presence. So the standard translation as in the sight of is already a theological dilution of a much more vivid phrase. What it's actually saying is that, and I'll read it based on what it is, it's kana, we're starting here, wa kana, and he was. Inda, near, ilahi, God, the God, wa hayya, right? He was near God and the life. So back to my point about the whole Musa, Isa, and putting Christ back in time by identifying him as the Rasulallah. That's what we're seeing here. The author is identifying that Moses was near / proximate / in the presence of the God and Hayya, the life. So it isn't that he was handsome at Allah, is that he was at Allah and the life. He was near Allah and the life. He was proximate to Allah and the life. What does that mean? Yeah, Moses spoke and interacted with Rasulallah, Malak Yahweh, angel of the Lord. That's the function of this. It's identifying him in Surah 3 as being the life, and then saying 30 surahs later, in 33, the numbers are very clear, 3, 3, 3, Trinity, right? And then 6, multiples of 3 might be important. Who knows how numerological they were, right? But yeah, it's identifying a Christ as being the life, and then saying that Moses was near, proximate to the life. So by correcting the word from wajihan to wahayyan, it's not meant to be wahayyan, it's meant to be wahayya. The an comes from this is a mistake. So read that as wahayya. We get not Moses was honored in God's sight, but Moses was standing near or proximate to the God, Allah, and hayya, the life. That is, Moses stood before the pre-incarnate Christ.
So this is the end. You're saying that this end is not there, which actually proves that ChatGPT actually happens to make mistakes sometimes. So.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, this is basically, it's sort of falling back on the traditional rendering in the Arabic grammar. So it's just a question of, okay, so are we reading this as an Arabic word or not, so forth, right? So the ending aleph signifies the definite article in the Syriac and Aramaic, but the aleph ending in the Arabic grammatically signifies the an sound ending. So that's why it's transliterated as an there. So just to clarify, right? So that is, Moses stood before the pre-incarnate Christ. It's direct affirmation of Christ's pre-existence. It also reveals a deeper structure, which is that Moses was, like I said, near God in the life, and then Christ is called the life, identifying him as being that which Moses was near. Yes, burning bush, you're exactly right, because it's the Rasulallah, the Malak Yahweh, who speaks to him through the bush, if I recall correctly, John, right? Right, so then the final affirmation here is, if we read them in harmony, Christ is the life, the one born to Mary, and the one present with Moses. As in he, in spirit, in the Christ nature, the Rasulallah, the Word of God, was present with Moses, which we as Christians affirm and understand very clearly as being the angel of the Lord.
Wow. Yes, wow. All of the damage that a little dot can actually do by putting it in the wrong place. But I don't think that we are surprised, because we've seen this thing so many times where something actually just changes over time, and that is even after the canonization, because everything that we have is after the stuff was canonized. We have in their traditions that everything was destroyed. So basically, God only knows what the Quran looked like just before it, but it does look like they maintained the whole thing. And then they added the dots and dashes, hundreds of years later, and they added the hamzas and lots of other things. But because they kept the text, the skeleton, the rasam, we can still go back and find things that they actually don't make sense as they are currently rendered, and then find the answers, which is phenomenal. I think this one, out of all of the things that we have found so far, this has been probably my favorite, because one little dot and it makes a verse that is sort of nah, it suddenly makes sense, and a lot of sense, and it works, and they would be hiding the life. In one of the first slides, we actually showed in that place where it seems to be talking about the Muhammad as the truth. So we are seeing these titles that are very much exclusive to Jesus, that a Muslim could say, well, they're as well for Allah. Allah can actually be called that. But Muhammad cannot be. So when you have a verse and Muhammad is the truth, he cannot be. Allah can be the truth, but not Muhammad. And it's because they are repurposing all of these stories and all of these titles and everything from Jesus and trying to put it into their character Muhammad, into their Allah as the creator, when the book initially was very, very Trinitarian, although the Trinitarian element, we will get there. But I absolutely love this one. I think it really shows very clearly one of the very big say moves that they did with just adding one little dot, and they hid the meaning for 1400 years until Cash came around and said, hey, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I don't think he's considered handsome, nor Moses. I think that's a silly word. So also just to note, by the way, for giving you a time frame here. So I checked Kitab al-Ain, which is the first Arabic dictionary that we know of. It was written in the late second half of the 8th century. So this is something around 770 to 790. And in that text, we have attestation of wajihan, meaning honored, esteemed, so forth, right? So just to give you a time frame, we have the 620, 630s, right? We have this text existing. So now we have, let's say, 150 so years. At that point is when we have attestation of the belief and recognition of this as being a word. There is, however, very interestingly, some like even way later debate about, okay, so but what's the root here? Where does it derive from, and so forth? So there's a bit confusion, but they very quickly get in line. This word means it's derived from faith, and therefore it's about saving faith, that whole concept of having honor and so forth. But yeah, so the point here is, so we have the text in 620, 630, even maybe before, right? Because it comes probably from an earlier tradition. And then, especially with the bulk of the text, I mean, just the amount of textual material, this didn't just pop out of nowhere, right? But then we go for 150 years, and at that point we know, okay, the dot was added, the corruption happened, they're now reading this as not the life, they're reading it as wajihan. So just to give a time frame there, and to what you were saying about hiding the life, yes, that's exactly what they're doing. They're hiding the life in the hereafter. They're hiding salvation. They're hiding the life from you, and it's evil. And so when there is scant dirt, it begets an excavation site. So we have all this reason to dig. So let's dig. So this is just one thing. I mean, this was what? I mean, what, 4 days ago? I discovered this one, and it was so quick. I was just, okay, Murad translates handsome. That's a peculiarity. Let's look at those two verses. And immediately I was looking through a couple manuscripts. I'm like, wait, there's something off here. There's something seriously off here. So what do? You do what I did. You transcribe it, because that's the process. You're looking back. You're you're thinking backwards. So the process was initially in the Aramaic textual tradition or Syriac textual tradition. I think more so in the Syriac textual tradition personally, but not exhaustively. And then you do the reverse process. So you transcribe firstly the either you have an al definite article that would then become a suffix a, or you don't have a definite article and it's originally already in the Aramaic. So which is the case actually in the case of hayyan or hayya. Sorry, not hayan, hayya, where then it would become the definite article a would become the suffix a would become the prefix al, and it would actually be read as hayya or al-hay, or rather, yeah, al-hay, which we see in other instances of the Quranic text, which will be something that we will look into as well, because this has implications for how al-hay is used in other instances. But just to sort of clarify it, so this is what you would do. You would say, okay, there's a point of interest. This is an interesting word. I'm not sure what's going on here. Let me transcribe it, transliterate it into the Syriac script, as you can see with what effectively was done in that table in the top right there, right? So you have the ha becomes the heth, the ya becomes the yod, and so forth, so forth. And then you simply use the tools that you have at your service. You run a deep research function on a GPT model or a Grok model or whichever large language model suits your fancy. And you just say, okay, look for this word in the Syriac textual tradition, in the Peshitta, which is the Syriac textual tradition, in the CPA Aramaic, which is the Christian Palestinian Aramaic tradition. And this is something I've been recently doing because I smell there is an influence of Mandaic theology here in the Quranic text, which is kind of gross, but it's there. So also ask for attestations of a word of curiosity in the Mandaic sources. I've found some instances where it's like, okay, we've got something funny going on here. So yeah, just, engage with the material. We have the tools at hand. You don't have to be a scholar. Everyone's a scholar nowadays. So yeah, very cool stuff right here. I'm very happy with it. It's very cool.
And as to what words people could actually look at, is exactly the same that we're doing. We're going through the Quran. We are seeing words that stick out like a sore thumb. You sometimes read something from the Murad's translation, and there is something you will feel it doesn't fit. It doesn't work well. And if that word appears only a handful of times, then you look at that word, try to translate it into Syriac, maybe other languages as well, and see if you can figure it out. So that's something that we do. Also, there are many words that Murad doesn't translate. They have to actually be looked into. In fact, the whole argument of Ar-Rahman came about because he didn't translate it. So he couldn't actually find it in the old records when he was looking at that. So he's pointing us towards words that we know he knows they weren't there. They're problematic, and we can really go for them. In his translation, also, he adds many question marks when he cannot find a word. So all of those things have to be looked into. Now, there will be a number of words that he didn't translate, and maybe they are actually attested in a different book that he never actually managed to get, but it wouldn't be even the majority. He has done a very thorough job, and there will be some words here and there that maybe they exist, but they are not written down in any dictionaries and he couldn't find them. Fair enough. But most of it, based on what we are seeing, is yes, if he didn't translate something, is for a reason, and we need to actually zero in on those words and see what they say. Kash and I were doing, of course, a lot of that. When we see something that doesn't fit, we are zeroing in and trying to stick within particular topics, like on this one that is everything with Jesus and the titles hidden within the text. But people listening, if you are interested in doing any sort of research like this, just find things in the Quran that don't make sense to you, and try to figure out the meaning. Because if they don't make sense to you, that probably means they were hiding something. They added dots in a different way, or they're telling you words that were not there to begin with. So it's very exciting times. After 1400 years, we are here trying to figure out perhaps one of the, not perhaps, the absolute most greatest literary mystery in human history. And all of that to help about 1.8 billion people in the planet, plus everybody else as well. So very exciting times to do this research.